Hi everybody, and thanks really for this opportunity to talk in whistle-stop fashion really about the BRAIN project. I'm going to have to really skip through this very quickly, and I'm just going to concentrate on a few features, but please, in terms of questions over lunch and so on, please ask me about any other aspects of this. Very quickly, background and context. Stands for Building Research and Innovation Networks. It was part of a GISC, a program, of which this is the third phase. There isn't time really to talk about this in detail. It's a very varied and wide-ranging program, which also has very important international links with a number of other programs. We'll be the next one is actually next month, where we're going to compare notes. It's based at Coventry University with Leeds University as partners. The basic aim of it was to look at all research, but we had already identified through some other research, also just funded research, about the importance of collaborative research in research as a whole, and the idea of collective intelligence. How do you take the enormous potential which might be there in an institution or throughout a community and find ways of maybe connecting things up to be able to realize that. The context of this, I'll say as well, Coventry University is not a traditional research university. Most of its research is what is termed applied research, so it's working particularly with businesses and the community. So for instance, it's number one of all universities in terms of SMEs it works with, and so on. So that was also one aspect we were looking at. How do we make collaborations like that happen? Okay, very quick outline, and I'm not going to talk in any detail about this. We did a lot of requirements analysis, and also this continued in terms of evaluation. So we had over 150 interviews and focus group sessions of different kinds. What we found from this, and again, there's no possibility of summarizing this in any way, but it was very interesting. We found that there were significant numbers of requirements, technical requirements of users that were not met. But we also were particularly interested in what this meant in terms of requirements, because there are a number of problems people would have seen because of Steve Jobs' sad death. Of course, he was quoting Henry Ford, who said that if he had asked people what they wanted, they said, "We want a faster horse." And how do you avoid that in terms of work with researchers? And it's opposite, where people actually want the latest thing when really what they really need is that horse. So how do you avoid that in work with researchers? So we came up with a number of concepts, really new perspectives maybe in terms of requirements analysis. One aspect of things which few people do, but which we did do quite a lot of work on, was looking at process. We were very fortunate here. Someone I've worked with before was an academic, but also has done a lot of work with businesses. For instance, he was the information architecture director for GlaxoSmithKline, a very large pharmaceutical company, and he set up their international network. And we were looking not just at saying, well, how do you technologize research, but saying, what's behind it? And are there ways which have to reorganize research itself in order to be able to fully use the capabilities of technology? How do you have the information about research in the proper ways that allow you to be able to combine it and link it in different ways as well? And what we found, a lot of what we did put in the report, because it was rather unprintable, but this wasn't just about our university, this was something also we did with some others and found that similar things there. There's a whole huge amount of it that could be done in terms of process, but again, I won't talk about that at the moment. What I do want to talk about is this last bit, and that is how do we go about fulfilling some of those requirements, particularly facilitating building communities with supporting services. Now, we did a lot of them in different ways, so what I'm again going to just talk about is a couple of particular features. One of the things we didn't want to do is to reinvent wheels, but we did found a number of important areas where we didn't see anything existing. I want to show you a couple of these in particular. Now, when we said to people, yeah, okay, what we want you to do is to connect up and work together, and of course, people said, yeah, that's great. Who do we connect up with? How does this work? So I want to show you, this is an online application. I just want to show this example. Now this, on one side, does things like it allows you to find if you're writing a paper or if you're a project, a potential project and so on. It finds collaborators, so it does sort of sophisticated searches of different kinds. But this is the interesting aspect of this thing, which is called Connect App, which I want to show you. And this links up maybe with some of the stuff we were talking about Serena, because people said to us, and I've done this, and I'm sure a lot of you have done that, you create these network diagrams of how people link to each other, and there's always 6 degrees of connection, you can link up with every researcher in the world, and people said to us, yeah, that's great, but what do we gain out of that really? How can we use it? So we particularly focus this on saying, okay, we want to find out who you work with, and other people might find it useful, but can we find people who you don't know about, who you could work with in different ways? And this tool particularly was aimed to look at that. So if you look at this guy here, James. Now James works in an area, he's actually a computer scientist, but he works particularly areas to do with cancer research, colon cancer research particularly. I'll be very careful what I say because there's Susanna here who knows a lot about, much more than me about cancer research. And so what we were looking for was things which maybe took it outside what he would normally know about. Let me show you some examples. Now, what happens here is, these people around here, this is all weighted, so the closer matches are ones which are closer in terms of the diagram. What happens is, these bits around here are people he'll probably know. They're people who've written papers with, people who are part of his research group and so on. It's not just that, we also, for instance, include some companies in here. That's another aspect I'll mention in a bit. But this is interesting. Now look at this here. This is this guy, Nigel. Now Nigel works in geographical information systems. You wouldn't really think that relates very much to this. But what this tells you is, and this is a sort of exploration interface, what it tells you is that there's something to do with with detection of features here. And of course, what this is about is that you've got James here was analysing actually images to do with diseased colons in order to say, are these diseased or not, what pathologies can we deduce from that? And we had Nigel there looking at various mappings and so on, saying, what can we deduce about land use, things like that. So both of them were looking at features in different ways. This one here, this was quite amusing actually, because no one, when we were doing this, we couldn't find anyone who, let alone knew this guy here, actually understood what he was doing. He's a metallurgist, and his speciality is shot peening, which is where you shoot shot at metals in order to do different things with them. And again, until you saw it, it didn't make a lot of sense. But what this guy was doing, and this is about image analysis of surfaces in particular, because this guy was looking at surfaces of metals and trying to make different, doing research in terms of how you deduce things in terms of the metals, in terms of its surface, which of course was similar to what James was doing in terms of what he was doing with colon. So completely different areas, but where there is a link. And obviously make the point, the whole point about this, why this is serendipitous, is this comes up with a lot of connections. We use lots of ways to try to filter it in different ways, but the idea is it's the researchers themselves who then use it to say, well, yeah, this makes sense. Oh, I'll go and talk to this guy, and so on. Just mention one other. This is very interesting, because this is one which crosses from the arts to the sciences. This is a graphic design researcher here, and it's come up, it tells you, again, I can't show it, I can demonstrate it, I can demonstrate it very easily. What this shows is it shows you the paper or the project or whatever which caused the connection. And this was because this guy had written a paper about the visual representation of difficult concepts. Now this is very important, which I'll just allude to in the next slide, and that's because we're very much on the lookout for things which are the actual inverse of a piece of research. Because what this guy is doing is saying, I've got some different concepts, how do I represent them visually? And what James was doing was the opposite. He had something which was a visual representation, and he was trying to deduce the difficult concepts to do with pathology which came out of them. So a very nice link in terms of that. So as well, it's not just being able to make these suggestions, it's the process which this then encourages in terms of research. There's a conference called EdMedia, which is a big international conference to do with education and technology, which I'm on the executive of, and we've got a very nice postgraduate stream as part of that. And this year I did a workshop on interdisciplinarity, and I used and developed this example because I started off and said, well, how many people here find that their work is relevant to cancer? Maybe there's one person there or something like that. But then working through an example like this and then working through them, was able to find out that pretty much all of them had something that was relevant to cancer research. And I'm sure we could do the same thing in this room. So it's very important in terms of making researchers also broaden their view of what their research was about.